Welcome to the OVA vlog. We are here at HCMC with the wonderful Beth Stegora, who has a doctorate in physical therapy and a certification specifically in pelvic floor and OB physical therapy. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So to get started, we're actually going to be creating a 3-part series on the pelvic floor. And this first part's really about what is the pelvic floor and what are some common issues that women face with the pelvic floor. So, without further ado, we have a wonderful model.
Yes. So, I think a lot of people think of the pelvic floor as just like the vaginal muscles, the muscles down there. But it's actually a lot of different tissues and structures. So if this is the pelvis, so you've got your pelvic bones, you've got your bladder, uterus housed inside the pelvic floor. But you can see on the bottom, all of the red structures are actually muscles. So there are a lot of muscles within the pelvic floor that help to provide stability to the pelvis. You can also see through the pelvic floor that there are nerves, there's blood supply to the pelvic floor. And so it's a really complex interaction of a lot of different types of structures.
Maybe we can just like tilt it this way a little bit so you can see like
Sure.
Here are the ovaries.
You got your uterus, which is small now and will expand up to here or taller when you're pregnant.
Oh my god, the uterus goes up to here.
Yeah, it's amazing what can happen to it, and then it shrinks back down again. But you can also see how the uterus is sitting on top of the bladder. And so that's why women, when they're pregnant, feel like they have to go to the bathroom all the time, because literally the baby is sitting on top of the bladder. You also have back here, you have the rectum, and so you've got all of your intestines sitting here as well. So that can be another reason why constipation can actually affect incontinence too, is the stool sitting on there. But the main roles of the pelvic floor are support of all of these organs, so lifting up the uterus and the bladder, and stability of the spine and pelvis. They also attach onto the tailbone too, and through the SI joint. So a lot of women, while they're pregnant, will have SI, sacroiliac joint pain, and so strengthening the pelvic floor can help with stabilizing some of that as well. The other role that the pelvic floor plays is sphincter control, so being able to squeeze and close the urethra to stop urine. Yep, and so you can see here's the urethra, and then all of the muscles around the area that would stop and squeeze.
So you can see you have 3 holes: the urethra, vaginal opening, and the anus.
The anus, yeah. So
which sometimes is a common misconception. Your pee does not come from your vaginal canal.
Right, and this is actually a really small hole. So those are some of the main roles that the pelvic floor plays.
So what are some of the common issues that women face with the pelvic floor?
Probably the biggest issues that we see are, number one is incontinence. And so with incontinence, there are 2 different types of incontinence. You've got urge incontinence. So that's the feeling of when you have to go to the restroom, you have to go now. So the inability to hold your urine for a prolonged time or even a short time to get to the restroom. So that's the urge incontinence. Then there's also stress incontinence, and that's a type of incontinence where if you have any sort of strain to the pelvic floor, pushing down, that will cause you to leak urine as well. So if you do running, jumping, coughing, sneezing, laughing, any of those stresses to the pelvic floor can cause some leakage. Women or men can also have mixed incontinence, so that means you have both types of those incontinence. So the urge and that stress incontinence. Some of the other issues that we see with the pelvic floor are pelvic pain, and that's a really common thing to see in men and women. And so some of the causes of pelvic pain in the postpartum can be perennial tearing. And so
And that is,
there are different degrees of perineal tearing. So as the vaginal canal opens, as the opening and baby passes through, you can get some tearing down in different directions, down through the perineum. And depending on
the perineum's just this area.
Yeah, this area through here. Between the vaginal canal and the rectum or the anus. And so any tearing, you can get first degree, you can get second degree, you can get third, which will come down to the anus, and then fourth degree tearing too, which will come into the rectal tissue. So oftentimes those are repaired with stitches. But a lot of women can notice some discomfort in the perineal area postpartum after you get clearance to resume sexual activity and you try. If you're having some pain down there, that's really a sign of some. Yeah, it's really common, but it doesn't have to be normal for you.
That's going to be a theme. Things are common, but they don't have to be normal.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there are lots of different other kinds of pelvic floor pain, and so it's important to see a physical therapist trained in pelvic floor therapy to be able to figure out what's causing that dysfunction, what's causing pain with intercourse, what's causing pressure, what's causing, there's other conditions where the opening just closes up every time that it's time for intercourse. So getting that checked out is really crucial, and there you can get help for that. And probably the third biggest thing that we see is pelvic organ prolapse. And so usually in women who've pushed for a long time during their deliveries, there can be some folding down of some of the tissues within the inside. So you can get folding down of the back of part of the rectum, the rectal tissue, cervical tissue, and what you will see is some of that tissue actually coming down to exit the vulva. And so when you feel these symptoms, or if you might have this issue, a lot of people report heaviness. And so they'll talk about heaviness with running for prolonged periods, heaviness with standing for prolonged periods, sometimes pain with intercourse too, because that tissue is coming down into the vaginal opening.
And that tissue is the uterus, right? So you might have the cervix starting to come down.
It can be the cervix coming down, it can be parts of the bladder wall folding back, it can be parts of the rectal tissue folding forward. So it can come from 3 different parts or different sides. And so during an objective vaginal examination, you can actually determine what tissue is coming down, which direction it's coming from, and the staging of it. So how far is it pushing down? And so that's probably another common thing that we see.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction to the pelvic floor. That was incredibly eye-opening, and I love this model. So stay tuned for our next vlog, which will be all about how to seek out a pelvic floor physical therapist, what happens when you go to that appointment. So stay tuned. And so thank you so much, Beth.
Thanks for having me.